Welcome to the Marketing Haven podcast, hosted by Nostra. We discuss what it takes to market in today's climate and how to build a killer marketing strategy. Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Haven podcast. I'm your host, Arthur Root, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Young Han, who is an investor in my business, Nostra, an advisor to many businesses, and also a fantastic marketer and entrepreneur. Young, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Arthur, for having me on the show. I appreciate the invite.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. So to get us started, I'd love to kind of hear, who is Young? How do you get to where you are today? You can start off with, your university days, or kind of whatever the genesis of who you are and how it started to come together. So I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Yeah, I'd say that that's a very tough one to answer because unlike most people, I think I've never really followed a straight path. I definitely started to find opportunities everywhere I could find them, and things that interested me and engaged my mind and piqued my interest. And I would be very aggressive in chasing those things down. And I think that it actually was fairly counterintuitive during my earlier professional career, because I basically would switch jobs so often. But now that I look at it in hindsight, I think it's actually what's allowed me to be where I'm at today, and be able to offer so much to so many people because of the vast experiences that I was able to amass during my early professional career. Not that I recommend that journey, because I think it was rife with luck, a lot of luck and a lot of good timing. And I think that's helped me obviously stabilize some of those risks and adventures that I've taken. But just to kind of give you some more context on what I mean, I've probably had over 50 jobs in the last 20 plus years. Yeah. And so there's quite a bit of like random things that I've done. And I think that has helped me a lot in my current job, which is, mostly consulting, but I've started to dabble in angel investing, advising, and really just like super passionate about helping startups scale and grow.
Fantastic. And so you touched on a little bit about what you're doing now. Do you want to dive in a little bit and talk
Sure.
about kind of the marketing components about, as well as the consulting and kind of everything under the sun there?
Sure. I've always wanted to be a marketer, and I've always loved marketing. I love the idea of creating things and processing things, and then driving things to completion, especially with the digitization of marketing, especially over the last 10 or 15 years. I have a natural propensity or desire to kind of go into what I'm comfortable with, like every other human being, right? We want to do what we're naturally good at, and that's kind of, for me, it's been numbers and statistical analysis and analytics. And over the last 10 or 15 years, there's a huge shift from like needing to be the most creative person in the world to being able to employ variations essentially and test to see what the conversion rates are. And being really good at analytics has actually helped me be very successful in marketing, as you don't necessarily need to be as creative as you may have needed to be prior to 2000. And so I've really leveraged that in my marketing career. And what I've also found through that process is that it's not just marketing per se that I enjoyed, it's actually just operations in general. And so I've dabbled a lot into operations and using that same mindset of like statistical analysis, find the problem, find a funnel, find a path, and then use math to kind of solve problems. And I've parlayed that into program management, finance, and all these other departments that I've been able to experience and explore during my career. And all of those things combined has led me to almost a midlife crisis. So I turned 40 last year, and I basically started a consulting business. I didn't want to expend any more time doing things that I didn't want to do as much. So for example, like I think my motto has been, if I love a job, 25% of what I do, then the 75% becomes worth it. I turned 40 and I just like said, I don't want to do that anymore. I only want to do the 25% I love 100% of the time. And so I just had the audacity to say to my wife that I wanted to try this. And we started embarking on this adventure of like how I can take all the different knowledge that I've and experiences that I've accumulated over the last 20 plus years and just do what I love to do, which is problem solve and drive to, I guess what it's called, drive to conclusions of my theses that I come up with. And it's been very, very good for me. It's a very good decision that I made. And I've been very, very successful over the last year and a half, probably more successful than I possibly could have imagined. And it's been a really great journey being able to pull from all these experiences that I actually thought were kind of failures in a lot of ways. And all of those experiences are proving to be so useful in my consulting career and being able to help all these startups succeed, because I've seen so many different types of businesses, so many different types of problems, and so many different types of industries and roles that it's allowing me to be more beneficial for these companies that are going through growing pains. And then more functionally as a marketer, there are a lot of clients that still use me as a utility marketer, meaning that there are at least a handful right now as we speak that use me as their interim head of marketing. It's not necessarily the thing that I'll probably stay on forever. And it's not something that it's necessarily what I sell, but clients will use me for that because I do have a heavy background in marketing, and I've spent probably the longest amount of my professional career doing marketing.
Wow, I mean, and I know so much about you, and I've been watching you kind of at arm's length for a lot of your journey, and so I've been incredibly impressed about everything that you've done. To dive a little bit more into kind of the interim head of marketing and kind of the marketing tactics and
Mhm.
things that you try to bring to the table for your clients and kind of what you've learned over the last 20 years. Do you have any, examples, ideas, concepts that you like to use in your work?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned, and I've learned this from like a very, very notable and famous marketer, Andy Cunningham. I worked for her in her firm, Cunningham Collective. She is by far the most famous marketer I know personally, right? And her claim to fame is, she helped Steve Jobs launch the Macintosh, helped him launch Next computers when he, got let go from Apple, and then he started Next, and then he also launched Pixar. She helped him with that as well too, and then just a dizzying array of, that era's tech companies. And now obviously she's doing it for this era's tech companies, but she's like really focused and developed this importance of like positioning before you start marketing, this idea that you have to know who you are and why you matter and where you sit before you even start. It's like the stuff before you even come up with the branding. It's like the rational aspects of like, what are the factual points of what you are, why you matter, who you are, where do you sit in the market, like all these kind of like things that seem very obvious, but people forget, and they get right into the color and the naming and like whatever that may be. And that was really, really beneficial for me to see her do that and kind of teach me that and get to learn that through osmosis, because I never really put that much stock into it. I love the aspect of creating, right? I love the aspect of branding and what does that make me feel like? And I think that needs to be an output of what the ethos of the company is. And so the importance of positioning is very, very important to me now. And I know how powerful it is and how much faster you can move as a company if you actually take the time to stop and do the positioning exercise and get your position down right first.
Oh, absolutely. I could not agree more. That's unbelievable advice. And that is one thing that marketers will never have to worry about automation or AI taking over a job in that industry.
Mhm.
Think that there's a big trend of automation using big data to make decisions when it comes to optimization and who to target with what ad at what time exactly.
Right.
But that granular strategy that you're mentioning
Mhm.
is the fundamental of marketing, and that is something that all marketers we should be spending their time on. Is in my opinion, that's where marketing time should be spent.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I like that you just parlayed kind of like macro trends, because as we start to further digitize the analytics portion of this and that kind of statistical analysis that I was talking to you about. And you're also you're also a pioneer in that. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I invested in you, because you're like literally championing this concept that we can use technology and AI to our advantage, right? To start doing the stuff that I was personally doing 10 or 15 years ago, like, through statistical analysis and spreadsheets.
Mhm.
You're able to take that and automate it, and then not only automate it, optimize it, right? And start thinking proactively. And so it's really interesting that you bring that up, because we're only going to go more and more in that direction. It's not something that you can like put your head in the sand and just like hope that it doesn't happen. Like, you need to understand that, like, as a marketer, if you're going to be successful now, you have to understand the technology that's coming out and what people like you are building. And it's very, very important to be aware of that technology and that trend, because if you don't, you're going to quickly realize that, like, the importance of what you're doing for the company and the value that you're providing for the company may have shifted underneath you, and you didn't even realize it.
Absolutely, absolutely. To shift it more back to you and kind of hearing more about your journey, do you mind kind of going over some of the problems you faced kind of getting to where you are now? You've had so much success, and especially in this last, year and a half. But you also mentioned that you've had, you know, 50 different jobs.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk about some of the problems you faced and how that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, and I definitely think that it's important to note that I probably had more failures than successes, and I think that I would contribute a lot of my successes now to the fact that I've had so many failures and I've done so many reps, right? And I've tried so many things. So there's a plenty of things that I could talk to you about that I was struggling with, and it really depends on in what aspect. But I can sum it up to one major theme that I think most problems came from, which was constraints. So meaning, like, you know, no matter what company I was at, and especially the companies that I was doing marketing at, the biggest issue was there's a million ways to do this, do marketing, I should say. And there's a million paths to take, channels to use, vehicles to expend, types of marketing getting created. I remember when ABM first came out, or influencer marketing became a buzzword. All these things. There's always new ways to market as the digital climate changes and the ecosystem changes. But the biggest constraint that's common to all the problems is constraint, because you don't have unlimited budget. Typically in these startups and that I've worked at. I can't speak for everybody that's worked at bigger companies. I know some of these big companies have massive budgets, but in the companies that I've helped scale and build up, when I was in charge of marketing, it's how do you do that and compete with these bigger companies at scale, with an advantage, with a limited budget. And I think that that's the biggest problem that is hard to solve for, and most people get stuck with, because it's not so much like how creative you are, how many great ideas you can come up with. It's trying to find priority and focus in your marketing strategy, channel strategy, and execution strategy, right? And making sure you're maximizing what you have and trying to find an unfair advantage, because there's always going to be people that are in your space that are bigger than you, or that can take you over very, very easily.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we talk about kind of young and kind of why you're here today,
Mhm.
are there any pieces of advice kind of that someone gave you, or is there any um was there a moment where it kind of clicked and you can kind of share that with us?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of those moments. I think the biggest one that I can't say it's necessarily about marketing, but more around entrepreneurship. Um, it's around this idea of, like, just do more, like, get things going and try things, right? And iterate and put into action some of these ideas. Um, the concept really is prolific in Silicon Valley. So I'm not entirely sure who said it to me that made it click, but a lot of people have said it to me. Advisors, investors, pundits, celebrated entrepreneurs, VCs, PEs, you name it. Everyone in Silicon Valley said it, right? And I think it's starting to get more widely spread across the globe, right? People are saying this concept of, like, move fast, right? But it's so true. And I think that it's one of those things, if you look at it more tactically and programmatically and statistically, like the chances of you actually finding something that's successful is going to be so much higher if you just iterate and test a couple of ideas in the market versus building what you think is this perfect plan. I know it sounds horrible because I think most people, I'd say the vast majority of people, won't even execute on their marketing plan because they want it to be perfect. Even worse, their business plan. Like maybe they're passionate about a business, and this is like this whole idea of like perfection paralysis sets in. Oh, I can't launch that because I don't have the right packaging. I can't launch that because I don't have the right team. And the reality is nobody really cares about you. They care about what your color and your brand is so much less than you actually think they're going to care. And it's much better for you to launch it and get that feedback of someone going, oh my God, that is so ugly, I hate it. That's actually valuable. And it's going to allow you to iterate and move faster to basically getting market adoption much more quickly. The chances of you being this one hit wonder and like infinitely just like growing this exposure overnight is so infinitesimal. And so if you could just like break down the emotions that you have about your plan, especially as a marketer, but definitely as an entrepreneur, and logically think about you and your impact on the world at scale, and just launch and not worry about what the world says or hates about it, and just use that data to iterate a better optionality, you'll be much more successful. You'll be much more successful because you'll be able to try 7 or 10 things by the time you have ideated a perfect plan, and most likely will fail it anyways.
Absolutely, absolutely. Young, thank you for all the advice. And I've really absolutely loved having you on. And again, thank you, and good luck with everything. If people want to reach out, if they want to learn more about your consulting, your marketing practices, how should people reach out to you?
I think via LinkedIn would be great, or my website, which is foreveryoung.agency.
Fantastic. Thank you for listening to Marketing Haven. Please subscribe below.